So after Israel invaded Lebanon to confront Hezbollah and then Iran's massive missile attacks on Israel in less than 6 months, Israel seems ready to strike Iran directly in a much more forceful way than ever before, Iran warning of massive retaliation if it does. The Biden administration says it does not support an Israeli attack on Iran's nuclear program, but instead prefers ongoing discussions with other punishment methods rather than an all-out war. And obviously, this is the big question right now. What is Israel going to do?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different options. There's obviously the nuclear facilities option. There's also a chance that Israel goes after Iran's oil infrastructure. That's how they bring in the money to pay for the nuclear facilities and the nuclear program and their weapons and all of that. Or they could hit some military targets. I'm wondering if with this strike, they go for military targets that would hinder Iran's ability to conduct a major strike in the future. And if Iran were to then attempt to respond to that in some kind of a major way with whatever capabilities they would have left, then you see the ante get upped to something like the military facilities. I'm also wondering what it's going to take for the Biden administration to put those sanctions back into place against Iran, the crippling sanctions that were in place during some of the Obama years and then certainly during the entirety of the Trump administration. I don't know what more we need to see before we really start to crack down on Iran and their ability to move money and pay for these kinds of attacks like they have been recently. Yeah,
it's a real question about the stability of the region and, what's going to happen in the Middle East. I mean, an all-out war with Iran, could be costly on both sides.
Yeah.
Israel has a superior military, clearly, in the region, but they only have 9.5 million people in the country. Iran's got close to 90. So you don't want to get into a long-term war with countries like that. And the other issue here is, what is it going to take to end this dispute that seems to be never-ending? Is this just going to be an endless war between these groups? Is there any way to reach some agreement? Or is it just going to be a situation where Israel's always on the defensive against these countries and these terrorist groups?
It seems that way. I mean, Iran is the key figure here because without Iran causing all the trouble that they've been causing, and we've seen this, especially during the Trump administration when they were able to start striking some deals with some of those Middle Eastern Arab countries. Saudi Arabia, they were about to potentially strike a deal with Israel. That was, perhaps part of the reason the October 7th massacre took place.
Very
was
possibly, to disrupt that.
Yeah, to disrupt that. So without Iran causing all the problems that they've been causing, I think you have other actors in the region who would be on board with some kind of a deal with Israel. Iran's the central player here, and it's time to really start to squeeze them both economically and militarily and take out some of these proxy groups like the Houthis. I'm surprised we haven't done more to impact their capabilities over there too, because they continue to attack ships and disrupt supply chains because of that. But I'm not concerned about some all-out World War III type scenario at the moment. I think this is more likely to slow down over time and kind of fizzle out than something that escalates to World War III or something that leads to some broader, regional deal. I just feel like that's kind of what we've seen in the past. It was a deadly day, too, in southern Lebanon yesterday for the IDF forces there. There were a number of soldiers killed, and so that continues to be an issue. And we really haven't even talked about Gaza or the operations that are ongoing there as well. So Israel's fighting on a lot of fronts right now. It does seem like we are offering a lot of support, and we're going to talk to retired Lieutenant General Richard Newton about our military presence in the region, and we'll dive into what Israel might be looking to do with their strike against Iran. We'll talk to him about that at 8:36 this morning.
Florida House Democrats are calling for a statewide grand jury to explore allegations that some Florida property insurers are altering damage assessments to underpay or even reject consumer claims. In a letter to Governor DeSantis, the House Minority Leader, Fentrice Driscoll of Tampa, spotlighted the 60 Minutes report that suggests that at least one insurer operating in Florida is undermining the damage reports. that they were issuing involving Hurricane Ian. That, of course, was the major Category storm, Category 4 storm that struck in 2022. Heritage Property and Casualty, a company the state says is under an active and ongoing fraud investigation. What 60 Minutes was essentially pointing out is that the company may have been involved with like zeroing out people's claims and saying you don't get anything after the hurricane.
Right. Or dropping the amount that they get from
like replacing a house at $250,000 down to like $13,000 to like as if there was like just a little damage to the roof or something.
Yeah. And then there are lots of questions about the investigation because allegedly there was an investigation and it was closed by the CFO's office, and Heritage paid a fine. I think it was like $1 million. It was notable because it was the biggest one that an insurer had paid, but it really didn't do much in terms of an impact on the company. And there were some, including CFO Jimmy Petronis, who were against issuing that kind of a fine. Look, I think this should be bipartisan. There needs to be a broader investigation into all of this, especially because you're going to have so many more people who are going to be filing claims now in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, and you don't want to see history repeating itself. Now, there has been some new legislation that was passed that's supposed to tighten some of this up. Heritage, they claim that they have reformed themselves, but you know what always happens in these cases? They pay a fine. They claim to have, reformed their wayward ways, and a law is passed in Tallahassee, but nobody actually gets held accountable. Like that was fraud that was alleged in that 60 Minutes piece. People should be going to jail.
Yeah,
that's right.
That one adjuster said that of 46 claims, 44 of them had drastic reductions.
Yeah, so who was doing that?
And then if you think about the fact that they had to pay $1 million fine, that's a drop in the bucket compared to having to pay out what they actually should have paid out.
Right. Well, when you screw people who, there's $200,000, that's what the adjuster said, and you're only paying them $15,000. You do that for a couple of houses. There's your $1 million.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and altering damage assessment forms is a felony crime.
Yes.
So where's Ashley Moody?
Right.
I mean, where's the Attorney General to enforce these laws?
Yeah, I want to see people charged with what we saw in that 60 Minutes report. And it wasn't just Heritage. It was a number of different insurance companies. So I would like to see an investigation. I'm on board with that.
It's disappointing to think that when people, buy insurance, which they have to do because the bank requires it, and they have faith in these companies to take care of them in a storm, that the actual intent is to screw them over.
No, and it's like that with car insurance, with health insurance, with and
that family featured in 60 Minutes, they still are paying a mortgage on that damaged home while renting an apartment, and they're still paying that company property insurance to continue to cover the home.
And talk about a slap in the face.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So an unexploded bomb from World War II that had been buried at a Japanese airport exploded on Wednesday, causing a crater in a taxiway. It also led to the cancellation of more than 80 flights, but fortunately no injuries, according to Japanese officials. It's believed that this is a U.S. bomb that was dropped during World War II. Now, there weren't any aircraft nearby at the Miyazaki Airport in southwestern Japan, but they did confirm that it was an explosion caused by a 500-pound U.S. bomb. And apparently this isn't the only time this has happened. We dropped a number of bombs on Japan. It wasn't just the nuclear bombs.
Yeah.
After we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, we sent some missions over there to try and do sort of a response to what they did to us at Pearl Harbor. Obviously, the big response was the 2 nuclear bombs.
Right.
But initially, we bombed out some places like Truck Harbor and parts of Tokyo, but some of them didn't go off, which was typical of these kinds of weapons during that era. And they've been digging these things up ever since. And occasionally one gets dug up or one gets triggered by something like a plane going over it or something in an airport, and then they blow up. And it's just an ongoing problem for them. It's like these minefields in many ways, these places where you have these undetonated explosives, and guess what? They last for decades.
Yeah.
And so in Japan, they're dealing with that. But the good news is nobody was hurt, but they do have a 30-foot wide crater or something from where this thing blew up.
We were just talking about the Middle East and fears of World War III. We're still dealing with World War II.
I know. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That's right.
Chris Trankman with today's top stories. Chris, thanks so much.
Thank you.